Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another streaming episode of Coach's Corner. Tonight we've got a very special guest. His Grace Duke Boru from Meridies is joining us, and we're going to talk a little bit about his history as a fighter and his journey, and what he's doing currently. So we're really looking forward to that. Hello, Your Grace Boru.
Hello, and my apologies to anybody who's tuning in to see the heroes and legends of Kaid. I am neither, but hopefully still entertaining.
And you still
You
got
will
time to
be.
do that too.
Yeah, the Heroes and Traditions will start back up in January. Probably January the 20th will be our next episode for that, and it will be the first part of our Kaid, our exploration of Kaid. I've got two great coaches joining me tonight for this interview. His Highness, Thorfinn the Cruel. Welcome, Thorfinn. It's been a while since we've had you on.
Glad to be back, man. I got to be honest with you. I think about you guys all the time, and I watch your shows, and I'm like, I'm excited to be back part of doing it. So,
Yeah.
Well, it's super great to have you. And fresh from his return from the British island, Duke Sean of Artemisia.
Also happy to be back.
Oh, I don't know, man. You look like you were having a good time. All the pictures you posted.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Oh, great. All right. Well, let's just jump right into it. Baru, if you would, why don't you give like a quick early history of when you started, where you started at, and maybe a little bit about who was at your first practices and who started your training.
Okay. Well, I started in the early 80s in North Alabama, Decatur, Alabama, which is the Shire of Glenree, and a frequently told story throughout the SCA. Some friends and I were playing D&D, and we met some other folks playing D&D, and those folks were in the SCA and introduced us to it.
that's my story too. So,
Same.
So me and my two best friends in early high school, and still two of my best friends, Master Sir Connell McDale and Duke Bryce McLaren, started going to the local practice, and as much learning from the more experienced fighters there, which included two brothers, Rolf and Eric Stormhawk, and now Sir Abic Feldane. The fact that the three of us all got in together really fueled I love my friends getting better, but I still want to be a little better than they are. So we were all just constantly trying to improve and come up with goofy tricks that never worked, and trying out armor and shield styles, but that competitive drive among friends really fueled all our fightings, which I think has proved itself over time.
What did you armor in? What was your first kit?
Oh,
Or what did you authorize in? I mean,
I think I authorized in carpet armor with an ugly great helm and a coffin-shaped shield. Although we all learned, started off with a strap-on round shield, because if you can block with that, you can block with anything.
I got a couple extra questions I want to ask about authorization in that time period. Then I'm going to let Thorfinn and Sean jump in. Do you remember your authorization fight? Do you remember who it was with?
I do not.
Do you know who authorized you?
I don't, but that was 40 years ago, so.
That's great. I mean, it has been a minute. Who was your first real trainer that you thought, it was, because I really feel like when I first started, even though the people who were teaching me knew some stuff, I didn't necessarily feel like they knew that much more than me, even if they've been playing for a while. Who was the first person you worked with that you're just like, wow, that person knows way more than where we are right now?
That would be Sir Robert Hightower. Um, and he very good, and also the benefit of being left-handed, which I am. But early on, he and Sir Saxus of Aaronshire, and not long after Sir Kyle of Kincora, the three of them were big influences on my early fighting.
And what year was this? Early on. When did you start?
Probably I started 81, maybe 1981.
So that practice and indicator there. I mean, it sounds like the group of you that were kind of coming up, like you didn't have any chivalry in your area at the time, really. I mean, it sounds like you were kind of the genesis of the beginning of that group as far as the fighter corps goes. How did you is that accurate? And how did you come to prominence from that? I mean, because we get that a lot where people are like, well, we don't have any knights in our area, we don't have anybody to teach us, and so how do we get the instruction that we need? So is that an accurate reflection of that practice that you're talking about?
Fairly accurate. There were 4 to 6 active fighters before we joined, but and the nearest knight was an hour or so away. But the people who got us into the SCA, Duchess Caroline of Mainwaring and Master Allen of Moffat, especially, were really encouraging on travel. So, especially as high school students, we didn't have all sorts of responsibilities taking up our extra time, and we traveled everywhere we could to, fight different people, meet different people, just having fun.
So you started in high school?
Yes.
So how did you? So who took you to those events? Or those fighter practices? What were the people that were willing to throw a teenager in the car and drive to an hour away to support that? Those people are pretty cool.
Oh, and yes, they are cool. But actually, the practice we were going to was in the town we lived in.
Okay, I misunderstood.
So we were driving ourselves to that. I was saying the nearest night. Was an hour or so away. So we didn't have nights at a local practice, as Sean was saying. But especially event going, travel with them, or we were old enough to have our own cars and traveled together and got into all sorts of foolishness.
And what does that practice look like now?
I believe that practice has about a dozen fighters, and there's another group about 30 minutes away, which is the Huntsville group in Dunhania Shire, and I think they frequently combine practices or visit back and forth. So there's a good more than a dozen people fighting, I believe.
I mean, a half-hour drive in any metro area is pretty much the same place.
Well, this isn't particularly metro.
It is not. This is I think at the time, probably town of 30,000 people.
Yeah.
And Huntsville probably had 60. So
yeah, you talk about a 30-minute drive to a practice, and Al-Anon, that's just the other side of Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
And
I live near Atlanta now. You can't get anywhere in 30 minutes.
Right.
But back then, a 30-minute drive compared to it takes 7 minutes to get all the way across town. So that was
right. It was way out there.
It seemed like a journey.
Can't tell if we lost Al-Anon or he just turned off his camera there.
Yeah.
So, that was in high school. And then in 84, both Sir Connell and I went to college in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. So then we were in the much deeper pool of the Barony of the South Downs fighter practice.
Yeah.
Which included...
that was downtown Meridians at that point, right?
Yes, very much.
Okay, so you started in northern Alabama. Then you went to college in the Atlanta area. I mean, you went to Georgia Tech, right?
Right.
So Georgia Tech is pretty much downtown Atlanta, and so you're at the heart of Meridies and the heart of Georgia, and you're maturing as a human being. You're growing up. What's this path?
I'm glad you think so.
I know, as best as any of us did.
Like,
He did say college. So,
But you guys, you and Connell both now have moved on, and you're starting to grow up. You're going to college. What is your path from new fighter in Decatur, Alabama, to person who will be knighted in a few years? What's that path from new fighter to knight like for you?
I think my skill level started to take a big upturn, because now I went from a group with just over half a dozen fighters to a group with just over half a dozen knights plus a bunch of other fighters, including Duke John Madkelt and Duke Orlando Cavalcante. So and with frequent visits from Count Richard Rafin, who later became my knight. So I was fighting people with a higher skill level, but also people who were, I got more training.
So answer this if you can. I don't know if you remember when it was, but when I first met you, you were just at the end of that sort of phase where you're winning fights. A lot of the fights you're winning is because you're left-handed, and then right around that same period, you started winning fights because you were a really good left-hander. It changed from having an advantage of fighting more righties than righties fighting lefties to you started to actually understand what you were doing.
Yeah, I will agree with that. I think many things affected that. Two things that come to mind are we're all big guys, and so when you start off, the only way to swing faster as a big guy is to swing harder, because you don't know better. And Duke John Madkelt, who's not a large man, said, "Son, you don't have to hit me that hard." So I started working on figuring out, okay, how can I get speed without putting muscle into it? And the second thing was not too much longer. For a while, Duke Tamiki was in town to work at the Shakespeare Theater. And he had all sorts of Aikido body movement and stuff, and he worked with me. And I think fighting him two-handed sword on two-handed sword, he probably hit me harder than I've ever been hit before. He twisted one way to block my blow and then completely uncoiled into my head.
So would you say like a cross-pollination type thing there affected your ramping that you were doing, like getting an outside source like that? Did that change your experience?
Yeah, I think it did some. It because he moved like people I fought didn't. So
right. So
yeah.
it created you had to adapt to be able to address that new style.
Yes.
Oh, that's fascinating. I love that when that happens.
Well, and likewise along those lines, when you're talking about John the Madkelt, he's a little tiny guy, and one of the things about being a bigger fighter is it takes less. I mean, you don't have to have mechanics. Honestly, you can just put more muscle behind it and get more power. So, was John able to work on better mechanics so that you could deliver not power easier, but so that your fighting could get
very much. Yeah, because and I know it's the legend of Meridies around the known world that we call lighter, but especially with at that time a more than 300-pound guy swinging at him, he made sure I adjusted my style to not.
I mean, because I know when I started fighting, when I started doing pell work about the same time. I was a teenager and like had no meat on the bone, and I had to have good mechanics from the very beginning because I didn't have that extra weight to just put behind it. I couldn't just be stronger and put more muscle behind it. So I had to have good mechanics from the very beginning. And and as I've run into people over the years, particularly people who have had massive weight loss surgeries and weight reductions. What you find, I mean, you're not 300 pounds now, so where are you? I don't know. Can't tell.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. So when you lost a lot of that weight, you probably noticed that a lot of your mechanics, or actually your power, is going to suffer because you don't have that extra weight to push behind it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you have to have mechanics.
So yeah, my mechanics adjusted at 2 points in my life back in college with John working on me, because there's also a limit to how faster you can get with just power.
Right.
But yeah, he made a big change in my overall fighting from then on. But then I had surgery in 2010 to lose weight, and I went from 365 down to 250 or so. And all of a sudden I did not have the ass I used to put into my swing. So yeah, I had to.
We see that a lot.
Yeah, retune on how I moved.
Brennan, His Highness of East Kingdom, he had surgery less than 10 years ago, and same kind of thing. He had to. He actually went out to the west there and worked with Hansa and Hebek and a couple of those guys to retool his mechanics to adjust for the fact that like you said, you've lost an entire person.
Yeah,
and you don't have that extra weight.
So for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of fighting Duke John the Mad Celt, he is frustratingly amazing at defense. So if you ever are able to put stick on him, you have actually moved yourself into being a little tricksy and very quick. And that has to have actually been an amazing thing to work for when you were there and you suddenly had, John in your practices, because as a goal of, I'd like to be competitive with the guy, you have to work really, really super hard to put a stick on it. So obviously when you did, the first thing he said was back off of it a little bit, but he's hard to hit.
Yeah. Well, and he was telling me to not swing so hard well before I was actually contacting him. He could feel it in his field.
Yeah.
Man,
right.
Looking back now, I see that adjustment also went from when you go from power to technique. You also really dial back how much you're telegraphing a blow.
Yeah.
To just swing with your arm, yesterday what you were swinging at.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing about getting those power hitters is, you can see it coming a mile away, but you still have to block it, because if you don't, you are just screwed. I mean, it is going to hurt.
Yeah, make sure you block that, right?
Yeah, here it comes. You put all that block up there, and you got the time to do that, because you, as the bigger fighter, you're not seeing the accuracy. You're swinging for the fences, and once you start throwing, you can't stop. Right?
It's a train.
Yeah. And so once it starts coming, it's like, all right, let's just put this block up here and brace for it. And I just got to make sure to block that, because if it doesn't, it's going to hurt. But I can see it coming a mile away.
It's kind of funny. Branos always likes to talk about how, the really super heavy hitters, that brings out your best fighting. And it's true in some ways. I mean, I've never fought better than when I was like sparring with Duke Conrad from Kaid, or even Mark von Neumann from Aiden Velt, because, man, I just don't want hit. I'll do anything to not get hit.
And that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, somebody else who sort of joined Bryson Connell and I's cadre early in our college years is another example of that. Gareth LeBruin, who is 6'5", 300 and something, ex-football player, huge shoulders, but also super fast.
Yeah.
And we started off early on, not wanting him to hit us.
That would have been a pretty rough practice for me, to be honest with you. It would have been like a lot of lumps, I think. But
So your Grace, you started in the early '80s. You're in high school now. You've moved to Atlanta, Georgia. You're going to college. When were you knighted?
I was knighted in 93.
In '93.
Yeah.
So that's a 10-year path.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are you done with college? You're done with college by the time you're getting knighted. And,
Yeah. I had gotten a job in Atlanta and stayed in Atlanta. It's a 10-year path. There are a couple of years in there, early college, where I wasn't real active, but quickly got dragged back into it.
So I don't know why in my head I was thinking you were knighted a little earlier than that. I guess it's because you packed so much in from when you got knighted to basically becoming a duke. That happened in such a short period of time. I mean, you kind of all just fell in there real quickly.
Yep. Yeah. I did well in a couple of crown lists. I finaled in late 92, got knighted early 93, and then one crown list later in 93. And then a month after stepping down, won the next crown list. So,
Right.
Yeah, back to back.
It all just happened really fast, it seemed like.
Yes.
Back to back.
This guy I knew from Georgia was suddenly a duke. It was like fun time in our lives, I think.
Very much.
So there was like a kind of a what gelled right there? What was the thing that was it the level of practice and experience, or what would you say like made you make that jump in that short amount of time from being like a non-competitor to winning crown twice like rapidly like that?
I think self-confidence.
Well, that's huge, right?
Yeah, because when you get confident of your fighting ability, you slip into automatic easier. You don't overthink stuff. You don't second guess stuff.
So like automatic, you mean like the zone, right?
The zone. Yes, the zone.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a very interesting way of saying that. Okay. Yeah.
In fact, the crown list, just before I got knighted, I was having so much fun and I was in the zone that I almost did not care at all what was happening. Right. One of the fights in the finals, I threw a setup for a shot I had been practicing, and the setup killed my opponent, which upset me just a little bit because I didn't get to throw the shot I was looking to throw.
Well, I love the idea that like every shot's real, right? So even the fake's real, right? That's awesome. Well done.
But, Alan and I talked about that before, with probing, using a shot to probe something, just as a test, it's like, well, yeah, but you one-shotted that guy. I'm like, that was the test.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes the probe kills.
Yeah, right. Throw every blow to kill someone. That's the lesson. But awesome. So from there, then you just, because I think that one of the things that we forget is that until you do an activity, it's impossible. Right? If someone says like, win crown, it's impossible. But then once you win crown, it's possible now.
Yes.
Right? And so then your confidence level just builds and so it becomes achievable.
Yeah. We've talked about that before, that line from Kingdom of Heaven, where they ask, does knighting a person really make him a better fighter?
Right.
And the answer is yes, it does.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because you're removing certain barriers that just come from wondering whether or not you're good enough, Right. And when you as an unbelted fighter, you get to the finals of crown, as unbelted fighters, we're always sitting around going, when am I going to get knighted, right? Or when am I going to be good enough, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to the finals of crown as an unbelted fighter, and there's got to be that moment where you're like, I'm good enough. So now they're just they'll knight me when they knight me because I know that I have that skill to compete at this level.
Yeah, I am glad you said that because I think that is the other big factor in what happened with my fighting, because before I got knighted, I was just, wound up. What am I not doing? All this stuff is happening. Why am I not getting knighted?
Yeah.
Just grit my teeth. And then at some point, I said, fuck it. If Duke John Bearkiller picks 10 people to be on a team, I'm one of them. I'm just going to have fun.
Yeah.
And then it just changed.
Yeah. And at some point that has to be enough, right? When you when you have somebody like John that picks you to be on a team that is, largely based on martial prowess, right? That is a recognition that somebody who's been doing this much longer than you have, recognizes that you have that kind of talent, and that is absolutely liberating.
Yeah, and that was all theoretical in my head. He wasn't. I don't know if he ever picked me to be on a team of his, but I am somebody he sought out at events to fight.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's a huge honor, kind of.
I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think this is an interesting point that we've landed on. It actually reminds me of one of the reasons why I'm always encouraging unbelts to participate in Crown, is because of the confidence that you can walk away from Crown with. I think that definitely was the case for myself. Your second Crown that you won was the first Crown that I fought in, and I did pretty well. I think I was made the semifinals, and I didn't want to necessarily win. I wanted to compete and I wanted to fight and I wanted to do well. But having just done well, win a few fights in Crown, it calmed my ass down. I mean, it really did. It was like, okay, I am going to make it at some point, so don't be quite, I didn't quite have the same chip on my shoulder that, no one's noticing me. Am I ever going to get knighted? Yada, yada, yada. Instead, it was, okay, it'll take the time that it takes and, cool off and let it happen a little bit. But the confidence of fighting and having fought in Crown and done well enough was really super helpful when it came time to try to win one.
I'm sure.
And I hope that everybody out there fighting gets to the point they knock that chip off their own shoulder before they get knighted, because I think it really puts humility within grasp.
Well, that's the rub, right?
Yeah, because if you get knighted when you still think your shit doesn't stink, it's going to take a lot to change your mind.
Yeah.
The rub is to learn that not to change who you are and your experience as you go into this new elevation as being recognized, right?
Yeah.
If you go into it with, like you said, like kind of a negative experience, you're going to drag that with you. And then your expectations and all those things are going to become a problem. I had a very similar thing where I was getting like close and I was like, kind of like people were saying like, oh, we can't wait to have you on the council. Right. That's kind of an anchor because it drags you down because now you're worried about everything. And I remember just sitting, I was on vacation in Italy and I was drinking a bottle of wine on the beach and I said, fuck it. I don't care. Right. I won't change how I do it in order to get this activity, or this recognition. And ironically, that's what triggered them to say like, oh, he's here now. Right. There's a moment where you have to say like, I'm not going to allow these things to influence me negatively.
And being that wound up is really impeding how much fun you're having.
Exactly. Yeah. No, for real. It's a thing that I wish I could tell people all the time. Like, find the joy and just follow the joy.
Yeah, all of us have been knighted for a long time, and we've seen so much of this, and it is so very common in our society.
Yep.
Because we put a lot of emphasis on the wanting to be knighted, and the reality is that, the more you want it, the harder it gets to actually achieve it, and I think everybody that I've seen that's gone through this that finally got knighted, it was always that fuck it moment.
Yeah,
it was that moment where they just decided, it's like either they're going to knight me or they're not, and if not, that's fine because I'm going to keep being a better fighter. I'm going to be what I think is knightly. And
what's knightly about that, Sean, is the fact that you don't care.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the trick, is to actually embrace kind of the values and just be like,
Well, and
who cares?
I,
Because
I've,
I'm
I've
doing the
said,
right job.
yeah, I mean, I've said about peerages in general. You know, I mean, you should want to be knighted, right? You should want to attain
Yeah,
chivalry,
of course.
but there's a difference between wanting it and being covetous of it. And I
Sure.
think that covetous is what holds us back. That when when you're sitting around going, "How come I haven't been knighted? I can kick that guy's ass," 6 weeks from Sunday,
Yeah.
right?
I wish we could find the perfect balance, because
I know.
on one hand, being knighted and having, it was a really cool moment for myself, as I'm sure it was really, really cool for you guys. But I mean, we get so caught up in the and trying to achieve peerages within the society, that while it's one of the cool and different and neat things that makes us different and cool, it's also kind of one of our bugaboos. It's, I don't wish to go to the extreme that some people have, that where they say, I wish we just didn't have peerages or awards at all, and let people just play if they love playing. And on one hand, I'm firmly believe in that, let people play if they love playing. But it does make it kind of cool that we have peerage circles and we have peerage groups, and we have crowns and those kinds of things. I would miss it if we didn't have it. However, it's caused so many problems. People getting upset about not becoming peers, or their friends not becoming peers, and
Sure.
Yeah.
I've been involved in other groups that didn't have any kind of reward structure of any kind, right? It would only be if you are a jarl, if someone recognizes you as a jarl, right? Which is interesting, right? But at the same time, every one of those groups I've talked to, the one thing that they say that in retrospect about the SCA is that having that kind of across the world infrastructure for like support and awards and recognition is something that they're like, I honestly tell you, we wish we would have done this. So while I hear what you're saying, at the same time, I've heard a lot of outside people going, we wish we would have done that. And so maybe there's got to be some kind of middle ground right there, where you could have both. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but
I don't know if it wasn't a cool thing. If a SCA peerage wasn't cool, I mean, it's, not cool for people who aren't in the SCA, but for us, it's a darn cool thing.
it does seem cool. Yeah.
If it wasn't cool and if it wasn't worth trying to get, then maybe there wouldn't be all the stress associated with it. So I don't know how you can separate the stress, because if it doesn't mean anything, probably people wouldn't care to work towards it. So I don't know. There's not an easy answer there.
Yeah, but it's a problem that's as old as the society. I mean, maybe not the first 5 years when everybody was getting knighted.
Right. Yeah.
So, a benefit of me being on the throne was that early spirit of traveling. It really stepped up, because I went to Australia, I went to a couple of Lilies, I went to some Penzic and Candlemas and Midrealm, and just fought incredible fighters who fought completely different from anybody I'd fought before, and made some great friends who, thanks to the pandemic, still feel like I know. Although I'm just looking at their page on Facebook, but
Awkward, I know, right?
but that just kept my skill and knowledge level expanded.
Yeah. Hey, does this jive with how you remember things as well? Because from my perspective, around not long after you got knighted and when you won your first crown, I really thought of you as just a really super dangerous offensive fighter. And somewhere as you came on the other side of your second crown, you had really brought your defense up too. And so, it was a combination of, man, he's got a ton of shots and they've got a lot of power, but he's really, really hard to hit. It really felt like that, you got your offense before you got your defense, before you kind of put the package together. Do you remember it that way as well?
I don't so much remember it that way, but that makes sense because especially that variety of people I was fighting, my defense had to improve because my tricks, didn't work on everybody.
Yeah.
But the defense getting tighter allowed more of my thought process to be towards my offense, if that makes sense. Okay, my defense is I know it's catching stuff. I'm ready to swing when I have the opportunity.
Yeah, it gives you that free space, right? To look for the open hole or the attack.
So I was sort of, that whole avoiding pain got me to, tweaking my defense so it got back into a comfort zone.
Well, and does that coincide with you traveling more as Crown to get out and fighting people from other, fighting top level fighters from other kingdoms?
Yes,
like you're saying. You win Crown kind of on this works at home sort of thing, and then you go out in the big bad world and you find out that these things that work against these things that work at home don't necessarily work on the out in the world. But, and then you have a choice to make, am I going to go home and just fight the guys at home, or am I going to figure this out and, and get better? Because I know, when Brian Tarragon won his first Crown, he went out to Penzic and he got trounced, and, and he came back and said, we're changing everything, it's just, and it just became better training. And that's really when Brian started bringing stuff home from everywhere, and that's where we kind of got that bug too, to go to other places and to bring people in, so that we could get something different.
Yeah, I was definitely getting hit in places I wasn't used to getting hit, and I wanted that to stop.
Yeah, right away, right? Like, how does this stop?
Wait, he's left-handed, but he hit me on my left ass cheek around behind me. No. That can't happen again.
So who was your kind of out of kingdom guru, so to speak, or the person that you were, most interested in going back and fighting again next year or whenever you got a chance or whatever?
Probably Braunus.
Well, that guy.
That name comes up a lot.
Yeah, I know.
I never even heard of that guy.
So when did you run across him?
Well, I had run across him probably at a border raids, which is a war that used to happen between the Middle and Meridies, but on his home turf up at Candlemas, I believe.
The Branos Invitational.
Yes. But as much for his skill as how personable he is.
Yeah,
he's just a humble, nice guy. And then he's hitting you with his stick.
A lot. Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, travel, as I recall, I think the first time I met you was at 30 year. Were you Crown Prince at 30 year?
I was not.
Up in Ontario? Was Gareth king?
That's possible.
Yeah, that was 96.
Okay. Yeah, that wasn't me. Unfortunately, we've never met in person. We've chatted a lot on screen, but
I thought we had. Yeah, because I remember I was Prince of I was heir to Principality of Artemisia at the time, and then I remember I'm pretty sure Gareth was Prince, or Gareth was king, and then and I'm pretty sure the Crown Prince went as well. And I thought for the longest time I thought that'd have been you. So, well, we will have to remedy that.
Oh, good, please.
I'm actually looking at coming out to Penzic 50 next year. So, if you're going up that way, we'll definitely have to do that.
So that gets us into the mid 90s. You've won a couple of crowns. Then you kind of cruise. You don't win again until when? So
2005, maybe. I'd have to go back and look at the list to see exactly when it was, but I had gotten married in 2001, and things had finally calmed down enough that I was fighting for my wife. And although at the time it seemed like I couldn't really get things dialed back in for years of Crown List, I think it was only 2 or 2.5 years of fighting before I won a Crown List again.
And you had not fought in Crown in between time in the interim.
I think I did fight in 1 or 2, late to mid '90s, but
didn't really get serious about it until you had a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
So you said it took a little bit to get dialed back in. What had changed?
Other than my whole life, because now I was married,
Right.
I am not quite sure, because we tried all sorts of things to, get me in gear in the tournament, and leaving me alone, berating me, encouraging me.
Well, I mean, some of that. I mean, I wonder if that has to do with those first couple of crowns, because you won back-to-back crowns. So you had the 2 back-to-back, and then you didn't win again until 2005, right?
Right.
So when you have those 2 back-to-back, again, kind of going on, this works at home sort of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know, my tournament head has been a evolution, been a process, and I wonder if those first couple of crowns you just really didn't have a process in place. Because I mean, Al-Anon, you've got to. I mean, I know when you say tournament to me now, that just sets a certain flag in my programming, and we just go, right. But that was a process. That was an evolution of things, And
I've been doing that for so long now. I feel like I want to say I always did it. That's just not true. I had to learn how to put on it's a tournament. But once I've done it now, I feel like, it's weird to me that people can't do it.
Yeah.
And I think I was still in a pretty good place with my tournament headspace, because I was winning tournaments, but not in my crown headspace.
Right.
Oh,
and
they're very different.
I think it partially was because it mattered too much.
Right.
I want to make my wife queen. And
man, I got to tell you, I believe there is that moment where the thing is, like when I was ramping towards winning tournaments, there was a principality tournament that I was really wanting to win, right? And in our kingdom we had principality and kingdom level. I would fight in the kingdom level one, go way further than in what I was doing in the principality one, because I was so concerned about winning the principality one that I was in a free space in the kingdom tournament. Right. And I found myself like pretty far into that. I'm like, oh, I didn't even expect to be here. And it's because you don't drag that kind of worry, or want, which then becomes like, how do I block, error, everything.
It's a distraction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you definitely get to that point where you're not fighting to win, you're fighting to not lose.
Yeah, and it keeps you out of the zone.
Yeah,
right.
And it is absolutely crippling.
Yeah.
I mean, as I mentioned on here several times, Crown Tourney is not a physical contest. It is a mental exercise entirely.
Yeah, because it's not the best tournament, and it's not the highest end tournament necessarily that you can get yourself involved in. It's psychologically really high end.
Yeah.
It's emotionally a super high end tournament, but it's not necessarily the high end. When you look across the SCA, I don't put many crown lists as particularly super high end. There's some, because they're just an endurance test as well. I mean, some of the West crowns and on-tier crowns that have, you got to fight 15 plus rounds to get to the finals. That's, that's both an endurance and a mental test. But like a Meridian
it can be
Crown,
very difficult. Yeah.
a Meridian Crown on a great year is maybe 26 people.
Right.
You know, you win 5 or 6 fights, you're in the finals, and you know, it's not necessarily, it's not the same. It's certainly not the physical contest some of the other tournaments are, but all crown lists are so emotional and so mental, and it's one of the reasons why I love crown lists so much. I love going and watching fighters and trying to see their process. You know, even if I'm not competing, I love watching other fighters and seeing if they can conquer that. You know, and I'm not entirely sure that it was all emotional at that time for you, Baru. I think also I kind of remember watching you fight, and while you would win tournaments here and there, you were still sort of picking your way to kind of calibrating the speed of the kingdom. Some, I mean, things had gotten so fast. And then suddenly you got it, you know, and it's like, it's that whole ability. So like fighting against Maximilian's a good example of that kind of thing. You've got to have your defense so stoked, and your range control, and then the speed of your own shots, or you don't stand a chance. And I felt like, you know, you came back and you started competing, and you were not quite there, and then you picked it up, and then you caught stride on what the speed, you know, you got the speed of the game. And once you got the speed of the game, it felt like, well, okay, Baru's a dynamo again.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. I mean, obviously you figured something out, because between 2005 and now, you just stepped down pre-pandemic. You've had 4 crowns since then, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So obviously you figured something out.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and then as we mentioned earlier, into 2010, had weight loss surgery. So 2011, lost 100 pounds, had to recalibrate all my movement and power generation, and still being in Atlanta helped a lot, because as he mentioned, Duke Maximilian, Count Gunter, and numerous others, you know, had to be at the top of your game at practice too.
Still John the Madkelt.
And still John the Madkelt, very much. And then, yeah, just before the pandemic, I won again.
So when were you able to let that go? That whole, you know, wanting to win. Was there a watershed moment where you realized that was the thing? You just had to let that go. What was your process? When were you able to let that go?
Evidently, right before that 2005 crown.
Evidently.
Well, I think it was, and it was. I think my wife may have said, you know, we keep trying all this stuff to get you to win. Just don't go out there to win. Go out there to have fun and do your best. And yeah. I don't care if you win or not. So just go. And
well, that's liberating a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's a free.
Yeah. She was never pushing me to be queen. Nice. She wasn't saying, no, I don't want to be, but she wasn't.
Right.
Yeah. Chomping at the bit to be queen. And she finally got that through to me.
I find that it's easier to achieve the kind of blank mind, the free space, when you don't have that, right? You don't have any kind of expectation. You're just doing it for the joy of doing it, and not dragging in any kind of baggage into your fighting experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I that was my personal experience. Is
likewise.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean,
if you really want it, that's the one you can't win, right?
Yes.
If you come into the mode of like, I'm enjoying just being here,
yeah,
then you can really extrapolate out your fight into just being present, and that's huge.
Well, and something I talk about quite a bit, that, you know, I try to practice that at practice, you know, putting myself into the mindset of, you know, it's time to be on. So at some point in almost every fighter practice I've been in the last 20 years, I've said, okay, let's practice being on. And
right.
You know, it has legitimately helped me when in tournament it's time to be on. Amber jokes, because they'll say, and salute the one who inspires you. And I always dutifully do so. And she'll joke afterwards, it's like, you don't actually need me to inspire you, do you? It's like, no, I'm inspired because I'm there. You know, I got someone standing opposite me. That's really all the inspiration I need. Now, I've been very fortunate in that, the inspiration to try to do a good job at Crown. Now, I absolutely have needed my consorts for that. And, not just the inspiration, the hit in the back of the head, to be better. But
So-
I personally, I've never needed outside inspiration.
So-
It sounds horrible because it sounds like it takes away from the romance of the and the magic of the sport. But I just find it super magical. Like to stand across any of you guys, and if someone was about to say lay on, that's all the magic I'll ever need.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, I mean, my consort doesn't necessarily, it's not like on that day of Crown they suddenly do something that makes
She had-
inspiration to make this happen. I mean,
They haven't done like 100 times, last month.
I mean
Right.
that inspiration happens in that 6 month period between crowns when my wife lets me go to practice, and when she lets me travel to go to where I need to get high end competition. I mean it's not a day of sort of thing. I mean that inspiration comes from letting encouraging me and letting me and giving me the space to do to practice the greatest sport in the world.
So I think that the four of us have clearly found that space, right?
Mm-hmm.
That mental space. But can you guys talk about maybe the triggers or the things that make you find that space for other people? So how like what techniques do you use to find? Mine is ridiculous, and we'll go into it last because it seems crazy, right? But I mean, like, tell me what you do to find that zero space, that zero mind allows you to be, right now, right here.
Okay. Sorry. Mine tends to be sitting in one of the front corners of our pavilion, watching the tournament without a bunch of interaction with other people. If I'm watching other fights, thinking about, what he should have done different, or what he's leaving open, or just, a fully engaged spectator, that makes that, that small step to put my stuff on and doing it myself.
You want like no information. You just want to be like trusting, like I don't know how to say this, trusting in like your training, and who cares what's going on over there.
Yes, and also, although I don't mind a little bit of small chit chat, I'm not just freezing everybody out. I don't want to, be in a deep conversation with somebody while the tournament's going on over here.
Sounds like you like to keep your mind engaged in fighting, even if you're not fighting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Well,
Okay,
and,
cool.
and also, I mean, it kind of sounds like, I mean, like Thorfinn said, being that spectator. I mean, it's the like, even though I'm in this list, I'm enjoying watching the list.
Yes.
Right.
I mean,
Who doesn't love those good fights, right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily for the, I got to watch this guy fight so I can figure out how to beat him later. I mean, you don't need that. It's just being able to just enjoy watching the fights.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think, at least for me, watching fighting and trying to have my brain at the speed that I can see what's happening, it's not necessarily so that, like Sean is saying, I'm not necessarily doing it to try to figure out how I'm going to beat someone,
Right.
but I'm practicing having my brain work really fast,
Right.
and
You're visualizing, right? You're seeing.
yeah, and I'm always analyzing. And if you ask me what's going on in the fight, I can tell you, and it's not a distraction because, my brain's thinking about their fights anyway. I think that's good.
Might as well share.
I mean,
with the class.
I do like that technique, Bruce Boru. The problem when you actually know people. I like that technique, and I think that's very helpful. You get, you're sitting up front, and you're staying involved in the tournament, even if you're not personally fighting. I think that helps a lot. I know for me, Thorfinn, the way your question was, and it all falls back again going to practice. I try to practice. I try to practice like I'm going to compete in a way, and that doesn't mean trying to blow people up, but I'm prepared at practice at any moment to go 100%. I'm prepared at practice to stop what I'm doing and analyze someone else's fighting and get very theoretical about it. But at the same time, I'm also at practice. And if someone says something funny or they're having a really interesting conversation, I can turn around and listen to it and then turn back and be back to my focus. And I feel like it's because I practice doing that at practice. I'm not distracted in turning. You can't really distract me anymore in turning because I've practiced distractions,
Right.
and how to avoid them and how to ignore them and how to put myself right back into where I need to be.
Do you have like a trigger or an activity you do to set that focus? Any of you guys?
Putting my helmet on.
Is yours? Your
You
the
know.
helmet goes on and the machine takes over.
For me, it really is. I mean, my
Okay,
helmet
yeah,
is a calming thing. It's like,
Yep.
this is the thing that I put on pretty much, nearly last that says I'm about to start fighting. And
Baru, what about you? What is the thing that like right before a fight that you settle into that fight at that moment? What is that trigger? What is that thing that
The only thing I have that's like a trigger is just before going onto the field, a big breath in through my nose and slow exhale and sort of settle into my gear.
You settle into your focus, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool. That's awesome. Sean, what do you do?
For me, particularly in Crown, it is the process of the salutes, and in particular, saluting my lady.
Is
Because
that you draw it in that power, right?
yeah, a bit, yeah, and that like that is she is the last thing I see before I go do violence. And
Awesome.
and when we have there's just that moment where it is
yeah,
just
it's
the
nice.
two of us.
Yeah. That's
In
beautiful.
just that moment where we're focused on each other, and after that she disappears, right? Because
Yeah.
I can't be going into the fight thinking, well, I have to do this because what's
No,
my lady going to think, or what's I mean, I have to just execute what I have.
Yeah, violence.
just-
You're gonna do violence.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at calibration and that sort of stuff, I mean, when I'm in that moment, I have to just make the best call that I make, in that moment, and I have to let my opponent, make their call as well. But I can't have that external influence, right, Brew?
I was going to say, and that disappearance you just mentioned, I tried several different rituals before getting into the tournament to get my focus, and then realized the more ritual I have, the easier it is for something to disrupt.
To measure with your ritual.
The actual ritual, right? Yeah, that's clever. I see where you're coming from. That's a very good.
Like I used to sit in the car and listen to loud rock music right before the tournament, and I was ready. But then somebody comes up and chit chats with me after I get out of the car, and now I'm out of the mind frame.
The less
it literally always amuses me when I see someone who's got a headset on and they're trying to get their their particular jam to get themselves stoked, and I'm like, you don't do that at practice.
No.
It's you're breaking your routine now.
Yeah.
Rather than allowing your routine to just flow. I do like Sean said, I think it was perfect about, the salutes. I've always also used when the heralds are doing the announcing, that's when I focus on my opponent a little bit and make sure I know how long their sword is. I don't need to be told if someone has a thrusting tip because I'm going to look and I'm going to see. I want to know how their shield is strapped, or if it's center, boss grip, or
left-handed.
if they're obviously yes, all those things. That's the time to start actually processing that, because I can't really pay attention to what the heralds are saying.
Yeah, word. I agree with you so much. Yeah. Is that there's this, like, if you fought them many times, there's baggage you bring in. You obviously can then assess, right? But at the moment, what I do is I call to the planet Mars, which has nothing to do with what we're doing, and it allows me to just be blank in the moment, right? And then I know that they have they're left-handed or whatever, right? But then don't go in with a plan. Plans are awful, and then just go in and have an organic fight. I think that's my best fights is when I have this kind of your blank zone where I just walk in and just let the fight happen organically around me. And so how we achieve that though is interesting, and like some people like salute the ladies and all these things. It is fascinating to see how all those things are what draws into that.
And I will thank Duke Maximilian for getting me to shortcut my ritual, because one of his techniques in the middle of a fight is, if somebody is really hitting on all cylinders and clicking and in gear, he will put some space in and start chit-chatting to get you out of the zone.
What?
And and if I need a big 3 or 4 steps to get back in the zone, that can't happen in the middle of a fight.
Man, that guy just should not talk in front of me. I'm just gonna hate him. But I would like to fight that guy now.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
Oh,
So he used to be really thin and a little wiry. And then somewhere along the lines, he discovered the joys of fitness and powerlifting and all sorts of stuff. And it was so funny because he used to think of himself as someone who didn't hit particularly hard, but he hit hard because his technique was great. His technique was amazing, little guy technique. And then suddenly he was big guy with little guy technique. And it's like, wow, you've got to back off of that.
That's one of those things, though, right?
When it was fast
form
and
is,
ridiculously hard, it was like, no thanks, man.
Man, form is everything. If you have good form, like you don't have to be a big guy to just deliver powerful blows. Then if you combine that with power, yikes, right? I've seen guys like that. Ugh.
I mean, it's really one of the great things about our sport. I mean, I've said our sport is ridiculously forgiving to a non-athletic body type, as Boru can attest to. I mean, there's a lot of big dudes, right? There's a lot of big dudes that are having success in our sport. But I mean, you do not necessarily have to be like athletically gifted. You don't have to come to this with I mean, I had no athletic background coming into this as a teenager. I mean, it was just street ball, and being taught this from the ground up. I mean, it is something that really with the right work ethic and the amount of effort that you can put into it, I really do believe that anybody with a basic healthy physiology can be exceptional in our sport.
Yeah, no, I've also seen people that have been what I would say incredibly good at our sport and never even win a major tournament. Like a person who can become like exceptionally gifted at the activity and never have achieved the crown or cornet level. I think that there's a lot of that out there too. So, I mean, really a lot of like great space.
So we had a question a little bit ago from one of the viewers with regard to how do you let things go so that you can compete with focus in the tournament, regardless if it's crown or just a tournament you're trying to do well in. And I think we touched around it quite a bit, but why don't we start with our guest and kind of hit the panel and think about that. What beyond trying to have a routine or not have too much of a routine and all that, it's like how do you just let go and allow the tournament to happen around you?
And that is a rough question, because the four of us have done it long enough that it's into the realm of guessing. But I think that if you can focus on the fight in front of you and doing your best and hopefully enjoying it, maybe you can limit the amount of pressure you're cluttering your mind with.
Yeah.
Because pressure isn't so much, it's distraction. Pressure is distraction.
But I'm glad it's there.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
me too.
I am super glad it's there, because if I handle the pressure and my opponent doesn't, I've done something better than them. It's,
Right.
so if all things are relaxed and easy peasy and whatever, that sometimes makes an opponent whom you should be able to beat 4 out of 5 times so much more dangerous if they're super relaxed and not concerned with it. I know that, especially in Crown, but and I'll try to answer Bess's other question about what makes a tournament high end. Being able to navigate that pressure is a mark of prowess. It's a measure of prowess just as much as a flat snap. It's maybe, and certainly more so, because we all know that at the highest end, you're emotionally or mentally winning that fight before you're physically winning that fight.
Absolutely.
Well, and what I was trying to say, I guess, about pressure is not so much to let it go, but to realize that it is distraction.
Yeah.
So if you can realize that that's what the pressure is doing to you, it might let you navigate how to handle it.
Yeah. Which is different than thinking about it and being weighed down by it.
Yeah, I'm not saying, oh, it's just pressure, let it go. You can't let it go. You have to control it. From a speech giving group I once belonged to, I talked to the best speech giver in the group, and he said, oh, I still have butterflies. I just have learned to wrangle them.
Right. That's a great point. And I know from my own perspective, I tell people that all the time. It's like, you just cruised right through the finals of that tournament. It must be great not to have butterflies. It's like, I have butterflies. I just, when I start feeling that flutter in my belly and, the sweat hit my palms and everything else, I just try to channel it to the center. I don't have the Eastern martial arts background to call it, anything like a chi or anything else, but I acknowledge that it's there, and I embrace it, and I say, I will need you in a few minutes. You're just messing with me right now. I don't need you in my life this very second. Go in here, and when I need you, explode out through my shots,
Nice.
or through a great block or whatever, so that it's energy. I mean,
it is energy. That's
butterflies
exactly
is energy, and it's either negative energy or energy you can control to use. I do realize that some people, have managed to get to a point to where they're so confident and comfortable that they don't get butterflies. But as I've said this before on another program, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, Bill Russell, who just passed away, threw up before every game he ever played.
God bless him.
He was still great. He still had butterflies every game. It never went away, but you try to get the worst part of it out, and then you use the rest of it to compete.
So I'm a big fan of boxing back in the day, and I would say that like Ali is like obviously the greatest in my opinion, but he's a person who took that and he channeled it, towards his opponent. And I don't know that I think that that's actually a thing that we should do here, right? But at the same time, I see what you're saying is like this concept of having that internalized kind of fear or stress, and then channeling it to something. I'm much more of a let it go. Like, I don't give a fuck, right? I'm going to fight whoever that person is. I don't really care what they've done or what they're going to do, because I fought them in practice, right? And so part of it is self-assurance of my fundamental skills, which I learned at practice. So I don't know. I think that, yeah, that's a really interesting hurdle to get over. is how do you do that, right? So, thank
I
you.
think we've all touched on that, but Sean, did you have any thoughts
I
on?
do, yeah. So as far as a technique, in the moment, I think it's important to understand that all of us, again, been doing this for so long, but finding the process by which we can just flip that switch. Because, like you said, when you say tournament to me, it doesn't matter what the tournament is.
Yeah,
That sets a certain flag in my programming, and we're just off. But that's a process. That is, and there were a number of things I had to go through early on in my tournament experience and career. I'll say that the first crown that I won, I would classify as saying that was a tournament that I ended up winning. I didn't dominate that crown. I ended up winning, right? And again, going back to the point of, crown is not necessarily the best evaluation, right? It's not necessarily the best fighters in your kingdom, right? We'll get to that in a minute, but it's like I didn't have that process in place, and it just kind of muddled through. And it sounded like Boru kind of sounded like that was your first crown as well. You kind of just doing the best you can, but you didn't really have a process in place, right? So it took a long time to do that, and I like Boru was saying, I've tried a number of different things to try to get through that. Listening to music that can help, or at least having a song in your head can help, right? Because as Eleanor was saying, when you get those butterflies, like for me, it was like, I think it was my second crown. It was like, where am I gonna put this? And you just find a tune that maybe the last thing you heard, and it's not necessarily going to be I have to listen to this to get ready for crown. But you get that tune in your head, and it just give you something that you can just kind of groove to, and take that just moment where you get the butterflies to just be like, let's just put a little dance in, like let's just put that somewhere else and give some focus. So there's a few things that you can do, but it's a process, and you're going to have to try a few things to figure it out, right? But some key elements that we're all talking about here that I think get down to how to get there is, when I won Coronet list, that was my first Royal list that I won. And I've talked about this quite a bit before, but for me, I had finally had that moment where I realized I'm good enough. Like we were talking about before, like once you realize that you're good enough, and that is suddenly no longer a barrier. And I got to that point where I knew I was going to do well in that list. I was going to go deep in that list, and I was eventually going to win crown. And knowing that and feeling that, it made it so it didn't matter that I won this coronet list, right? Because I knew I was going to win one. And there's a certain, again, it's liberating. There's a certain freedom in that. But being able to realize I'm going to go deep in this list, I'm going to go do well. Even if I don't win the list, I'm going to do well. And that kind of leads to the thing that I have helped a number of people in our society across the known world get over that hump, right? Those guys that are, constantly semifinals and finals and that sort of thing, and they just can't get over it. And invariably, the one piece of advice that I've given people that has seemed to be the most effective is when I tell people going into a list, forget about winning crown. Forget about winning the list and forget about what it all means, right? Because it's like, oh, well, you get in the finals. Well, who's going to be my head of retinue, and who's going to be my head of my captain of my guard, and who's going to do this and all this other stuff. And the reality is, if you end up winning, you're going to have people just throwing themselves at you anyway to do these jobs for you, right? But you don't need to worry about that until you actually win, right? So forget about winning the list. And it's not that crown tourney is not something you should want to attain, right? It should be something to strive for. It should be something you want to do. But the more caught up you are in what it means, the more that's going to just absolutely cripple you. So forget about winning crown seems to be the piece of advice that I've given to most people that has taken, regular semifinalists and beyond and coasted to victory after that. Just forget about winning crown.
That's actually perfect, Sean. I mean, it's for my own self, my own journey. When I was fighting well when I was trying to win, but I fought consistently so much better when I just tried to fight well. And then winning is a side effect of fighting well. This is great advice to people because you can't really practice how to win a tournament at practice, but you can practice how to fight well. And,
Right.
you know, and then you take that and you go compete. You know, it's a much easier transition to practice how to fight well, knowing what the bar is to fight well, and holding yourself to that bar. You can practice that, and then in tournament, you know, every fight will fight well. And I think that's also, this goes back to also helping with the stress and the pressures. If your bar is to fight well, you can lose, and it's okay. You can lose. You can walk away with, oh, here's what I need to work on, or here's something I picked up on, something that I need to work with. But you're not just focused on the winning and the losing. You know, you fought well, and if you fought well, then you know, you can still give yourself a pat on the back. I fought well. I got beat, but I fought well. You know, and younger fighters or fighters who, you know, we're very lucky. We're, in a sense, we trained and worked, put ourselves in a position to where we are multiple list winners, multiple royal list winners, all of us. We are that. So when people hear us talk and they're like, yeah, easy for you to say. The thing that I want you to hear, person who isn't always a threat to win Crown List, stop trying to win Crown List. Just like Sean said, just figure out what fighting well is, hold yourself accountable to that, and keep improving on that all the time. And then if you're meant to win Crown List, it'll happen. But you fought well. You know, it's...
And you know, I want to just touch on something that you said there as well. You know, the people that say it's easier for you to say this, right? Because I've heard that a lot too. And the answer that I've had for that for a long time is this: it's not easy for me to say because I'm a Duke. I am a Duke because it's easy for me to say. And once you get to that point where you really can let go of you know, wanting of the needing and the wanting to win crown, man, it just really gets a lot easier.
I guess a tangent advice that I've given friends that seems to work well for them: the A and the B. A, you fight well enough to win Crown List. Don't go in trying to do something different. Don't go in trying to fight better.
Yeah.
Relax into your fight. And the B of that was a friend said, I'm getting ready for Crown List. And I said, stop saying that. Because when you say that in your head, you're telling yourself you're not ready.
Not good enough. Yeah.
You know, you can be tuning stuff up. You can be knocking some rust off. You can be dialing some stuff in, but you're ready. You could fight Crown List today. You're ready. Don't say I'm getting ready. You are ready.
Excellent. So Sir Bess asked, you know, if Crown List is not a high-end tournament, what is a high-end tournament? And I did want to kind of backtrack a little bit. Crown List is a high-end tournament from the emotional and mental stakes. And it can be a high-end tournament with the prowess, you know. So you can be in a crown that might have considerable prowess roadblocks that you have to navigate through, and you know, good on you if you do. But by and large, I don't think of Crown List as being a high-end tournament in the same way as something like a Candlemas or what's the one they have in Ontier that
Well, there's Ursula's.
Yeah. Ursula's, yes.
Ursula's.
And
well, I was gonna touch on this. I think you know, when we had Estrella, for the longest time for me, the Outlands Prize Tourney has always been one of the best tournaments, and the reason I say that is because one of the things that you get at a tournament like that, an international competition like that, first off, there's no job associated with any of these tournaments.
Woohoo!
So we can, you know, the people that are entering this get to enter and fight free without concerns for having a job, and an expensive job at that to have to do. We simply get to execute at the highest possible levels of our sport, right?
Yeah.
And what you get at an international competition like that, like Ursulmus, Candlemas, Outland Surprise Tourney, Burka, I mean, there's tons of them out there, right? What you get is unknown skill versus unknown skill. And that to me is the greatest test of what your fight really is. Because as Boru was saying earlier, it's like, well, I got all this stuff that works at home, works against a certain caliber of fighters. I mean, even some, the best fighters in my kingdom, right? And it's going to work against these people. But you go to Candlemas and all of a sudden that shit doesn't work with Chronos, right? So unknown skill versus unknown skill is absolutely the best test of where your fight really is. Being able to find somebody that you've never fought before at a high end level is a gift in our sport, because we all kind of travel in packs, right? So I mean, we tend to know what's going on. You've at least heard of somebody or seen them fight or something. So being able to find somebody that you've not ever fought at a high enough level, that is absolutely the best test of your skill. Because your fight, whatever that is, has to be good enough to compete without any Rolodex information whatsoever. And my fight just has to be good enough anywhere I go in the known world to be able to compete. And that doesn't.
It reminds me, Sean, of those early UFC years when it was style versus style, and they didn't necessarily have a game plan for the other person's style. It was really, can your style and your skill beat someone else's style and their skill, kind of a thing. I mean, and over the years that has morphed to now they fight UFC. Mixed martial arts is its own discipline pretty much. And so. And they do game plan for every fight, kind of a thing. Whereas, these large international tournaments, it's you can make or break who you are just because you don't know, they don't know you and you don't know them, and you certainly, even if you know them, you haven't had that. I have fought you 20 times and in this year kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think we mean when we talk about a high end tournament.
Yeah. And that again gets back to what Thorfinn was talking about, no preconceived notions, and that's something I know that I learned from Sagan. I know Thorfinn's got some influence there from Sagan as well. It's like you can't go into a high end tournament. You can't go into a Candlemas thinking, oh, well, I fought Boru, 20 years ago, so it's going to be the same fight that it was. I mean, 20 days ago, 20 minutes ago. I mean, the fight that you're having, right. I mean, like Boru was saying earlier, I have to focus on the fight that is in front of me right now. Not the fight that I saw this guy have, 20 minutes ago. Not the fight that I had with this person, in the second round where I got beat with them. Like, what is happening right now in this moment? And those tournaments that are not crowned, where you don't have a job, where you have people from all over the world that are entering, those are the kind of opportunities that you have to find out how good you really are.
Well said. So we're towards the end of our stream, and I wanted to ask, because we talked a lot about your journey, but I want to talk about where we are right now. What does your training look like now, and what is your what's a day in the chivalric life for Duke Boru these days?
These days, I'm making a practice maybe every couple of weeks, and then fortunately been able to go to some events recently. But you had asked me about a slump I had a couple of years ago. And it wasn't so much a slump in my fighting, but it was a slump in my enjoyment of fighting. And it happened right along the same time as the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. So I got in touch with Branos, and he said, well, I don't know what the hell I can do to help you, but here you go. And advice from him, I talked to Paula Bellatrix, it changed something up. So I started fighting with a center grip, which I'd never done before. And fighting was all of a sudden more fun, because although that practice I get to is not frequent, it is loaded. It's me, it's Duke Bryce, Duke Timothy, and Duke Wolfstand, Sir Ingolf. So there are people there that can give me as much fight as I want. And then I also really started working on improving my teaching skills. Sir Wolfstan is excellent at body mechanics, and I have a real good grasp of body mechanics, but he's really helped my being able to vocalize them. And then I worked with Sean and Duchess Helga on improving my skills with video analysis, and they helped me out a whole lot. So learning more really, brought the fire and fun back into fighting, and not like I wasn't having fun, but it's really ramped up. And now I almost come out of my boots when I'm teaching somebody something and they get it.
Oh yeah. That's great. So Thorfinn's responding via interpretive dance because he can no longer hear us. It's not a seizure. Well, I don't think it's a seizure.
It's not a tumor.
Yeah, not a tumor.
No, that sounds great, and I love how much joy you're getting from teaching now. That it's such a big part of what I do anymore as well, and I'm so grateful to have teaching. And it is you're right. It is such a kick, an adrenaline boost when someone gets something and you help them get something, and it's the different boost than when you've done something well. It's something that actually helps someone else, and I really get that. So I envy you that, and I'm pleased that you get to do that too.
Yeah, I mean, all of us that have had a certain amount of success, I mean, there definitely comes a point where helping someone else find the kind of success that I've been able to have is far more satisfying than any success I could have for myself at this point. Mm-hmm. When you get that call or that text that says, thanks, coach, and just got it done, 1 crown or won this list or whatever. I mean, it is just immensely satisfying to know that you helped in any small way.
Yeah, or you teach them a shot and then they kill you with it. It's just great.
Oh, I love that. It's like, you taught me that. Like, I know where you got it from.
Oh, I know you got it, and you're not going to hit me with it again. But good job.
And now I'm going to show you how to throw it right.
So here's a question that I stole from an interview that I did a couple of years back, early when the pandemic got. I thought it was such a cool question, and that is, whom in the kingdom, whom in Meridies do you most enjoy fighting, and why?
I think right now, and it's not a single person, but it's a short list. The people I mentioned at that practice.
Yeah.
Duke Timothy, Duke Bryce, and Duke Wolfstan, because they are all, they're working up in their game, and we're all, in that upper echelon of fighting. So, one good improvement by one person means you're whooping everybody else, and they're not going to put up with that. So like when I started out with Bryce and Connell, you can't relax on your fighting in a great way.
Yeah. You got a spiral of excellence.
Yes.
One person gets something, then everybody else has got to work to catch up. And then the next person gets something, and you guys just spiral yourselves up to improving your overall prowess of the whole group.
Yep. Oh shit, Bryce traveled out of Kingdom and learned something new. Now we've got to figure out how to deal with it.
Well, but that's the evolution of the sport, though, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's people have a hard time understanding, those of us at a high enough level, where it's like, I'm not training somebody good enough to maybe just win crown, right? I'm training people to replace me. Like I'm training people to be better than me so that I have to chase them. And I've been pretty fortunate to have some of the folks that I work with that pressure me on a regular basis, and it's the evolution of our sport. That's how our sport keeps getting better.
Yeah, and that fun in a bubble is an event I went to just before the pandemic called Adult Swim.
Yeah,
and
I'm a big fan.
Oh, I know you are. And it is insane how much fun that event is, because here's all these different styles and the best people at them from all over. And it's not a tournament pressure situation. It's a, oh, can I beat you? And oh shit, this is fun. What'd you do? Show me. And yeah.
And there's so much learning that happens at events like that. Some of the non-SEA events, like when we do practice out here, we had one back in April, and being able to have so many people from all over the exchange of information that happens at those kinds of things is just mind blowing. And it's really remarkable to me that something like Adult Swim, where you can literally see the sport get better over the course of a weekend, because so many people are so generous with their time and their information, and likewise are open to getting information from others as well. And the free flow of information and exchange is just it's what we need.
Yeah, and because they're having just as much fun as we are, and you can't shut them up about fighting either.
Right.
Well, that's great. That's a good positive note to end on, I think. Sean, do you have any closing thoughts or questions or anything that you'd like?
No, it's been great chatting with you, Brew, a little bit.
You too.
I thought we'd met some time ago, so we will definitely have to remedy that for sure. But it's been really good to hear your process, and I know you were coming up in this society about the same time I was down at Pensacola.
I think we may have met back then, but yeah.
88 to 90, but I think we're both. I was I know you were still coming up, but but I know we were playing about the same time, and I was playing down with the Gulf Coast there, so I spent some time down there. That's when I met Caroline.
And Bryce's night, Kyle of Kincora, and his wife at the time, Rhiannon. We were down there all the time, so.
So it's been great to chat with you. Like I said, we'll definitely have to make some time at some point to get to stick on.
Definitely.
Well, and my final thoughts are for you, Your Graces. Over my SCA lifetime, you've been an icon and a figure, a hero, even though you're close enough to be a peer group rather than, you're not like a generation before me. You're just a few years that you started before. And I think we're actually the same age. I think you just started when you were super young. But you've been a benchmark for me for so long that I will always hold you in the highest esteem. And so I'm glad that you found a way to get your groove back on enjoying parts of practice again and stuff. So it's wonderful to hear. And I hope that I see you the next time I'm at Meridia's.
Oh, me too. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks a lot. And I'm ill prepared and I have no idea what we're doing next Friday. Sean, do you know?
I do not.
And it's going to be great. It's going to be amazing.
It'll be great. Yeah.
Is there something next Friday? Because it is the Friday before Christmas.
Yeah, we may not have anything. I'm not sure, but we'll check the calendar and we'll post it in the usual places. So thank you everyone for visiting with us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you guys all again soon. So, all right, thanks.
All right, take care.
Mike, thank you.